For the first time since Trump reclaimed the White House, some of his close allies and aides are privately acknowledging that the president has been knocked off his stride. All right, we've got no time to waste. Let's jump right into the aftermath of Trump's Liberation Day, which was a wholly unnecessary self-destruction of an otherwise healthy U.S. economy because Trump decided that he needed to place tariffs on basically every country except for Russia and North Korea for some reason. But domestic markets immediately dropped. Global markets slumped overnight. Even Polymarket, which is just a betting website that reflects how people feel at the current moment, it's not some super accurate indicator, but the fact that US recession in 2025 spiked up to a 50% chance, according to Polymarket, is not good and shows you how people feel about the Trump admin, where people think this is going to go. And the way it goes into a recession is after other countries begin to retaliate even further. And that's going to happen today, tomorrow, throughout the next week. We're going to see countries escalate. I mean, we've already seen the German vice chancellor say that Japan and China, two historical rivals, are now coordinating a joint response. The Trump effect is so powerful that he has historical rivals coming together to try to pin the US down and make them chill out. But let's watch this clip. Make sure you scroll down, drop a like, drop some blue hearts in the comment section. Let's listen to the German vice chancellor.
Could that include taking a different stance on potential future cooperation with China, for instance?
I think this is an extraordinary day for the world economy, comparable with the situation after the Russian aggression on Ukraine, where we knew that something new is happening and we were not prepared in Europe to cope with the challenge. Yes, I think that if you look to the Asian market and the Asian states, that Japan, South Korea, and China, they have agreed of giving a united answer. And I mean, we should not be naive against China, and they have their own interests. But the first interest of everyone, with some reason, is that we not let the world economy go to shatters. And this is exactly what Donald Trump has announced yesterday.
It's an insane amount of self-destruction, and there are a few key things that were said there. The first one that really struck me is when he said this was comparable to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I agree, it's a massive shift in the global dynamics and not in a good way. We had alliances and treaties and agreements in place that led to decades of peace and prosperity. And when Vladimir Putin breaks those treaties and invades Ukraine, it's very damaging in the same way that when Donald Trump breaks a lot of our alliances and pushes our allies away and breaks treaties, it is not good. I mean, the US benefits from a lot of this, but also when he said, quote, "We should not be naive against China because they have their own interests, but everybody's interest is to stop the world economy from shattering." He said basically that. It's actually really powerful because now we're seeing in real time countries that don't want to turn to China being almost forced to turn to China. Trump is playing their hand, and now they're saying, hey, we don't like China. We know they have their own nefarious interests, but if it's partner with China or the entire global economy collapses and we go into a recession worse than 2008, a depression, then at that point it won't matter if we're friends with China or not because we're all going to be out on the streets. So it's just a wildly reckless move that Trump is making. And let's see this. Here's what other countries are saying about Trump's tariffs. China, the Commerce Ministry in Beijing vowed countermeasures against the sweeping new tariffs in what he described as unilateral bullying. The Trump admin hit Beijing with a 34% duty. The European Commission president and EU said the bloc would be united as a response and will take measures soon. Japan then promised swift and bold tariffs in response. And I would never root against the United States, but honestly, good. Do it, Japan. Show Trump that he's fucking around with all of our wallets and do swift and bold tariffs. Honestly, I couldn't think of a worst case scenario than all of the countries kind of bending to Trump's will and being like, all right, we will do exactly what you want. No, slap him in the face back with swift and bold tariffs in return. Let's read this breaking news update. Even the countries that are not facing high tariffs are going to be in trouble, said an economist at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. It will disrupt supply chains and inject a huge dose of uncertainty into the global economy. And that's what we're seeing all across the markets. Uncertainty, uncertainty, uncertainty. Here are the futures for the S&P 500, which just absolutely tanked during Trump's speech. And then further overnight, 4% That is not a small number for an overnight drop. That is absolutely wild. Going back to this, some experts are questioning how durable the tariffs are from a legal perspective. Many are arguing that it's an overstep of the executive branch. Part of the reason why Trump is so obsessed with tariffs is because it's one of the economic tools. It's the only economic tool the president can use without Congress. He can do it unilaterally through the executive branch, but this seems to be quite the overreach. Maya Luna said, Trump's new announced tariffs basically add 20% to the cost of any product you buy. This is going to be horrible, and that's before we even counter in the retaliatory tariffs and what happens if a trade war escalates among some of our closest countries. So, Icy Vert said, someone explained to me how these tariffs will make my life better. And then a MAGA supporter responds, this is from a Trump supporter, lower taxes for you because we'll tax other countries instead. First of all, this was translated through Twitter, so I don't even believe that this person is American. But also, that's not how it works. The taxes are on you. The taxes are on the consumer. The taxes are on the American citizen. It has never been that other countries are taxed, and Trump knows that because he was begging auto manufacturers over the phone not to raise prices once his auto manufacturing tariffs go into place, so he knows the effects. But really quickly, this is an article I was reading early this morning, and I just wanted to skim through it because I found it incredibly interesting. Trump's Day of Reckoning. The president's allies are privately acknowledging that he is in a rough stretch, and I think rough stretch is an understatement. In the past 10 days, we've seen Signalgate, we've seen Tariffgate, if we want to call it that. It's just economic destruction. They've admitted to accidentally deporting people who should not have been deported because they refused due process. They've removed due process broadly. I mean, the past 10 days, in and of itself, have been an absolute shit show. I think the past 10 days, honestly, have been worse than the first 50, 60 days of the admin because Trump was just ramping up. But in the past 10 days, he's wrecked the economy, wrecked our national security, deported people with no due process. Again, just wild. And I want to make sure I'm repeating these other events because while the tariffs are incredibly horrific, we can't get distracted solely by the tariffs. If I made 8 videos on the tariffs today and never mentioned the deportations with no due process, then we'd lose our ground there as well. So I just wanted to bring that up. But read this article. President Donald Trump said he pushed his so-called Liberation Day from yesterday to today. It says Donald Trump pushed his so-called Liberation Day from April Fool's Day to the day after because he wanted people to take it seriously, but it's still equally as unserious. But last night, or I guess 2 nights ago now, Republicans took a double-digit loss in a closely watched Wisconsin election. Oh, I forgot to bring that up a second ago when I was listing all of their L's. Oh, and Cory Booker as well, yeah. A campaign that had become a referendum on top Trump advisor Elon Musk. The first major scandal of Trump's term, his team's use of Signal to discuss military attacks, sensitive military attacks, could spawn an independent investigation. Some influential MAGA luminaries and immigration hawks have even begun to criticize the admin's deportation tactics for lack of due process. Consumer prices aren't falling, but the stock market sure is. I guess when Trump said prices will be lower, he was talking about the S&P 500. As Trump moves to escalate his trade war, fears of a recession are rising. For the first time since Trump reclaimed the White House, some of his close allies and aides are privately acknowledging that the president has been knocked off his stride. They admit that the past 2 weeks, particularly the Signal scandal, which they didn't have a great response to, which has led some congressional Republicans to defy Trump and demand a probe, have been the most challenging of his term. And while we're talking about Republicans defying Trump, can I remind you that last night the Senate passed a resolution to counter Trump's tariffs on Canada as some Republicans rebuke the president's plans. They passed Tim Kaine's plan through the Senate and they got a few Republicans to sign on. Now, as far as I'm aware, it was only about 4 Republicans, but we're making progress. I would say that that is progress for sure. For months now, Trump has tried very hard to make Liberation Day a thing. Soon after his January swearing in, he said that this day will be a great moment on April 1st. And then, of course, he moved it because he didn't want it to be a joke, but it still is a joke. And then at 7:06 Eastern time yesterday, Trump said it's Liberation Day in America. And I was joking about that all day. Like, hey, happy Liberation Day to all who celebrate. I hope everyone's having a great Liberation Day. But then Trump later in the day got increasingly frustrated. In this case, his anger was directed at 4 fellow Republicans, Senators Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul, or rhinos as he'd called them, whom he said were being extremely difficult to deal with and unbelievably disloyal. I mean, they're being disloyal to you, but they're being loyal to the US economy and the people who live here, I would say, by opposing tariffs on Canada. Quote, what is wrong with them other than suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, commonly known as TDS, Trump wrote. I love this guy. This guy is just, I can't, obviously that was tongue in cheek. I can't stand him, but this is just uniquely shameless. How do you nuke the economy? And then when someone criticizes you for tanking the economy, you try to say they have Trump derangement syndrome. It's almost impressively shameless and like mentally ill. Like he is dripping mental illness. And I don't mean to be insensitive when I say that, but I think the level of narcissism he has means he doesn't have reality tests around him. So this dude is constantly going on a insane, narcissistic Kanye West type meltdown, and no one's really there to check him. But the thing is, while Trump is scolding other Republicans for not really being too sure about Trump's tariff plan, he doesn't seem sure himself. Trump has vacillated on the size and targets of the tariffs multiple times. They were still being settled in the hours before the Rose Garden announcement. Oh God. In the hours before the announcement, they were still being settled and they were still doing these shitty ass calculations. One White House official confirmed to me, again, they were still being settled in the hours before the Rose Garden announcement. One of the White House officials confirmed to me, but never on whether to impose them. Trump knew he wanted to. Trump assigns outsized weight to the stock market when judging the nation's economy, but even tumbles on Wall Street have not dissuaded him. Trump possesses few consistent political ideologies, but has promoted tariffs since the 1980s as a means to reduce trade deficits, but he doesn't understand what a trade deficit is. But this is true. There are clips from him in the 1980s talking about this. But I just want to say, Trump baffles economists with tariff formula. I was talking to a Trump supporter friend last night, and I sarcastically said to them, you know, I'm not worried about Trump's plan. Basically, every economist says it's a great idea, and I'm sure he's listening to the great advisors around him. And my friend immediately was like, dude, I'm catching your sarcasm. I'm scared too. So even my MAGA friends don't understand why Trump's doing this. They're still holding on this weird hope that it's a negotiation tactic. Literally, MAGA supporters still think it's a negotiation tactic. But some lawmakers are beginning to realize that they're in deep shit. They're voting against Donald Trump. And can I also point out that U.S. stock futures and the dollar have been tumbling on Donald Trump's tariff plans? Global markets even just slumped overnight in a horrible way. Chinese markets fell, German markets fell, everything fell overnight because of Trump's stupidity. And I'll leave it at that. Make sure you drop a like, subscribe. If you're not subscribed to the channel, scroll down and hit that button. It would mean a lot. I love all of you. I'll see you in the next video, and peace out.